record. There we go. So I feel I have done my bit. So I'll just say thank you for joining, but then I'll hand over to Vicky, and between Vicky and I, we're going to host this session.
Okay. Hello. Welcome to ShopTalk. I'm Vicky, by the way. This is the first of many ShopTalk experiences, and we're really excited about hosting these events. There's been a lot going on in our industry, and it's probably one of the toughest times in probably the last 20 years. And we really feel this is an opportunity for us to come together. It's a way of doing more training for you, but make it as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, by all means, put them on Messenger to us, or at the end, we will have an opportunity for you to ask us any questions as we're going along. We're really excited about having Tim Gaunt with us today from Nature's Aid. And he will be talking to you a little bit more depth about arthritis and muscular disorders. So like I said, without any ado, I'll hand you over to Jo, who's going to introduce herself, and so that you can learn a little bit more why we felt we were able to kind of host this and move forward.
Thank you, Vicky. Yeah, so my name's Jo. I'm the owner of Amaranth. I've got 2 stores in the Northwest, one in Manchester and one in Cheshire. I'm also a nutritional therapist, and I guess that was part of my journey into health stores. Is I qualified from the College of Naturopathic Medicine in 2010, and after that just happened to bob along to a local it was a health store at the time, but a bit more of a homeopathic store. Sort of got chatting to the owner, ended up working from the clinic, doing a lot of nutrition advice, and strangely, somehow about a couple of years later, it was time for her to move on. So I found myself with a health store and then opened another one. So the main thing from the point of view of this evening is what Vicky and I are here to share is our knowledge as nutritional practitioners, but also how we bring that into our stores. And then, as Vicky said, it's great that we've got Tim here as well, because Tim can obviously give us the real kind of technical expertise. So what we're going to do is Vicky and I will chat a bit amongst ourselves to start with regards to what's happening in our stores, with regards to specifically tonight joint pain, which is the kind of topic we're going to focus on, and then we'll bring Tim in. So back to Vicky. Do you want to just introduce yourself with regards to your experience, etc.?
Thanks, Jo. So a lot of you may have known me. I'm Vicky Perks. My dad is Kevin Bowles, and we together own Bean Freaks. Bean Freaks is a family business. We've been in it for 40 years, and I've been working within the business for the last 32. Through the business, I learned a hell of a lot, but also I went on to do a training to Patrick Holford and did a DIP-ION nutrition course. And I also went on to do a master's degree in complementary health studies and did that in Exeter University. So it's quite prestigious, but it also means we really understand kind of what we can and what we can't say, and how to present that in the best way to your customers, because it's no good us doing the most scientific display of training to you if you can't translate that to what your staff, and let's talk about, say, the Saturday girl. It's somebody with the lowest level information, how they can take things on board and how they can use that to help customers, because effectively this is what this is all about. How can we translate this into information that we can share in our industry? So at this, like I said to you earlier, I feel this is a really important time for ShopTalk. Now is the time where we need the health food store to have a collective voice. We need to have our professionalism so that people come in, know that we have all of this information behind, and working together more with the NAHS gives us that opportunity to say, hey, we're part of a body, and that we work together. And if everyone has issues or questions about anything, they can contact us. You know, Jo and I and any of the members of the NHS are that level of approachable. Anyway, that's enough NHS flag waving. Health advice is really needed. It's because it's really an opportunity to, this gives us an opportunity to explore deeper health products. So I'm going to hand you back to Jo, and Jo is going to introduce
the rest of the session. Thanks. So yeah, so just to reiterate what Vicky said there, the materials that we go through this evening, you're welcome to share them with your store. You're welcome to share them with your staff in the store. Obviously, not directly with customers. It's for kind of professional use. But any of our thoughts, any of our opinions, Tim's got some slides for us that we'll be able to send out at the end as well. So shall we start by talking a little bit more about how we, the kind of complaints that we see about joints in our store, and let's get into the kind of the topic of joint health. So Vicky, so in my store, obviously I see a lot of people coming in, as I'm sure you do, about joint complaints. What sort of things are you seeing in your stores in Cardiff?
Well, the thing is, one of the reasons we chose joint complaints as the big kickoff really was the fact that 20 million people in the UK suffer from musculoskeletal problems. That's quite huge. I mean, there's anyone who says their nana's got a knee problem or Uncle Joe's got a back problem. So there's nobody that hasn't been touched by joint pain of some description. So this is kind of, like I said, a key area within my store. But also, when we look at kind of Cardiff and Wales as a nation, we're particularly in Cardiff, we've got an awful lot of sports. We've got the rugby. We've also got football, which is getting really high there. We've got a lot of running going on. So we've got a lot of different kind of Olympic athletes based in Cardiff as well. My parents actually live next door to Colin Jackson, but that's another hi Colin. But it is another kind of so we have a lot of people, and what I'm noticing in the shop, the people that are coming through the door are probably much younger than they used to. I would say we used to see a lot of people more 45 to 70 kind of bracket, where I actually think my demographic in a city centre space store has come down to around 25, 35. Don't get me wrong, we're still seeing kind of right through the generations, but I think COVID has kind of meant that a lot of people are only just coming back. So I have a lot of people looking for joint repair and injury repair, a lot of sports injuries. So things like using arnica gel with them, and also people are looking for things to actually help enable that repair. So again, I know Tim is going to talk a lot about this, but things like glucosamine, MSM, chondroitin formulations, collagen-based formulations are all selling really well within the store. And I'm getting a lot of people looking for CBD-based products, mainly because they've seen a lot of research with ex-soldiers kind of using CBD for anti-inflammatory purposes, but also pain relief. So this is kind of a market that still seems to be quite buoyant for me. What about yourself, Joe? How are you finding within your store?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would agree with what you're saying. What I think is interesting is I remember when, going back 10 years ago now, when I opened the store, we saw from day one, from me being involved on the shop floor, an awful lot of mainly osteoarthritis, mainly in older people who were looking for glucosamine, looking for chondroitin. And that was kind of the way it was for quite a long time, actually. But then our demographic has got younger, but our biggest demographic now is women, 40s, early 50s. Menopause in our demographic is enormous. And what I'm hearing more and more is about menopausal or joint pain that's related to that time in life. And I didn't think it was anything that anyone used to talk to me about at all. And interestingly, I did a talk recently on menopause, and I asked everybody to fill out, everyone who was coming to it, to fill out like a little online survey before about the symptoms. Joint pain came up with the most votes when they could kind of tick which symptoms. And part of that is probably the overall, we're talking about menopause more and more, but actually it's just showing that those joint aches and pains are happening absolutely in that demographic. People are looking for ways to improve flexibility, reduce pain, etc. So certainly, and when Tim's speaking later, I'd be really interested to see how we can support that group as well. It's not necessarily the traditional group of this kind of onset of osteoarthritis. It's obviously things happening earlier on. So Vicky, you talked about obviously you talked about arnica. You talked about you get people coming to you with sports injuries. What's your sort of approach when you're talking to someone on the shop floor with regards to what you're going to offer? Because there's a huge amount of things out there. So how do you work with that?
This is really important because when you're working with an individual customer, you're working on personalized advice for that specific individual. So never be afraid to ask them a load of questions. Generally, customers had the courage to come into your store and ask you for advice. They're happy to talk about themselves. I've never met somebody who's not really. So don't feel embarrassed about asking, well, fairly personal questions, nothing about their sex life or kind of, their toilet habits necessarily, but but
we go into that quite a lot.
they'll absolutely kind of tell us about those anyway. But asking them things like, have they actually got a diagnosis of what's going on? Have they visited their doctor? This is really important stuff, because particularly if you know the full facts, you can also then go through the layers of checklist in your mind. Oh, they haven't seen the doctor. Make sure you say, have you gone to the doctor? Some people will say, oh, I can't get an appointment, but at least you've raised an area and you just reiterate, I think there's something you need to check out. Also, it's really important that we make sure that we get their medication out to them, and try to make sure that it's not just, oh, I'm taking this painkiller. Just ask the other question when they've said that you're not taking any other medication for any other reason. The one major one is when they're on warfarin or blood thinning medication. It really checks spanners in the works. And I think if they're on lots of medications as well, it's always important to kind of then give information, but just have the bravado that you would like them to check with their doctor before they went ahead, or the pharmacist before they went ahead. It's just being safe. If you've covered your own back, and we've also been a certain level of professionalism then, but the more you can find out about them, including their bowel habits, has a huge impact. Because again, some people's diets, particularly if it's more rheumatoid arthritis, they're shoving a load of gluten and they're living on sugar and Diet Coke, chances are they may be incredibly mineral deficient, and this will have a huge impact. So again, the more information you can get from your customer, the better. They'll feel really valued, and it's amazing how much information you can get in a very short period of time.
Yeah, and I think sorry, Vicky, I'm interrupting you. That's obviously where health stores can make a massive difference, and particularly at the moment, I'm sure we've all seen it in our stores where people are coming to us because they can't get an appointment, and that they're sort of struggling to get advice. But I mean, obviously, as all kind of health stores owners know, we have to work within our scope of what we can do when referring back to the doctors, etc. And we have also got the protocol that we share within our stores with regards to your kind of questions, medications, etc. I don't know about yourself, but it's one of the challenges sometimes I find when we have kind of newer members of staff as well in the shop floor. We kind of always have to know where everybody's sort of boundaries are, and know when to get one of the nutritionists or when to get one of the more senior members of staff.
This is what I always say to my new members of staff, and this is what this is about, this working towards the lowest level, so our Saturday girls upwards. If they feel uncomfortable, then they should be passing that customer on. So never if they're starting to get into something they've got to look up, then they need to be thinking that needs to go to a more senior member of staff that's had just experience. What I usually say to my staff is that my shoulder's really wide, that I'm happy to kind of, for you to give that customer my details or my email address so they can pop an email to. And the other thing is, and this seems an appropriate time, we're talking about the fact sheet that we're going to have at the end of this program. They've got the protocols there. They've also got kind of what you need to be a little bit more concerned about. So again, making sure that your staff have access to fact sheets and things that are, so that they've got that support. So if you haven't got a senior member in the store at that time, they've got advice from the senior member there for them to kind of gain access to.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to what's selling well in our stores, and what we're finding. I mean, personally for me, I find turmeric curcumin is still selling really well. People coming in. I sell actually this. I think I'm an anomaly amongst health stores on this. CBD has never really taken off in my store at all, but we've never really pushed it particularly. I don't know. It was just an area that, for whatever reason, we didn't kind of get into very much. There was a lot of local independent sellers around, so maybe I kind of just stepped away from it a little bit. But certainly turmeric, curcumin, when we're looking at that sort of inflammation and pain, glucosamine chondroitin as well, but I must admit it's kind of changed the balance on that. So I'm going to be really interested in kind of, I guess, refreshing that knowledge and research when Tim does his little bit.
I think
hyaluronic acid. Sorry.
I think, like I said, this is a thing, having that refresh. Some the oldies we forget about because the new things come through, and they can be important as part of the program.
Exactly. Hyaluronic acid as well is popular, particularly liquid form hyaluronic acid. And this is it's an attractive solution to particularly women in that kind of menopausal demographic, because obviously it's got the link with the skin as well, and they like to see that it's got that overall. But we've had some good feedback on hyaluronic acid. People have found that by taking the liquid form, they seem to get quite good relief from that joint aches and pains. So those, I guess, would be the ones for me. But I'm certainly very interested in what Tim's got to say, because it may be time to refresh my range a little bit. Okay, so how about you, Vicky, for your stores? Are they similar things, or?
Pretty much, it's, you know, I'm finding now you're getting much more kind of savvy customers come in. They feel they know a lot more. Mainly they're getting their advice from TikTok, which is why we really need to kind of start readdressing.
They often know an awful lot.
No, which is one of the reasons is massive, actually, for me. It's not necessarily that I have been promoting it. It's more the fact that they've already read about this on TikTok, or they, you know, with stars now on the telly advertising CBD, and Saga magazines packed with it. I think you get kind of like a crossover. So it is still kind of an area that we sell a fair bit of, and it's nice sales. And the research is there, which is the big thing. I can't sell anything which, you know, I couldn't put my heart behind. So that's really important. I love the hyaluronic liquid. I love hyaluronic acid anyway. When you're talking about dryness in the body, for women, that's really important. Essential fatty acids I love, and I hope Tim will, because I hope Tim will talk a little bit about fish oils as well, and but also on vegan alternatives. You know, what would he recommend as a good alternative to a vegan? Because I know a lot of our customers are. And again, like I said, looking at things like collagen is kind of really coming up there. People loving bone broth, and again, both our sports athletes are kind of more, a lot of them kind of looking for vegan alternatives as well now, because again, a lot of vegan bodybuilders and vegan athletes in Wales as well. So that's huge at the moment. So yeah, you know, we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. We're all kind of turmerics, glucosamine, fish oils, you know, but it's which one do you recommend for which? So
yeah, I think that's the thing, because there are those kind of newer ones. So collagen, I mean, collagen is huge at the moment, but it's newer on the market, so you can kind of see how the sales of collagen are coming through. But is that the best thing, or actually are some of the traditional things that we had better options?
Is it at the expense of something that's more appropriate? So it's keen for us to find out that little bit more information.
So is it time to hand over to an expert? So as Tim's frantically rewriting
searching for an expert.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to be really informal here, because something really weird has happened. So I'm actually in the shop, and my dad is waving at the window. I'm like, and he now thinks I'm ignoring him, so he's gone in the opposite direction in a mood. So anyway, so yeah, over to Tim. Do you want to introduce yourself, Tim, and then we'll ask you some questions about joint?
Absolutely, yeah. So for those that haven't had the pleasure or dubious pleasure of meeting me before, I'm Tim Gunn. I'm the head of research and development at Nature's Aid. Many of the stores I will have been in over the years. I've been at Nature's Aid for 31 years now. My career in nutrition started way back. I did a degree in biochemistry, and then did 3.5 years working in animal nutrition, straight out of university before seeing the job advertised at Nature's Aid, who were looking for somebody to set up a laboratory here at Nature's Aid, and came in, set up the labs, all the quality control procedures, and sort of got involved in the research and development of products. I've been out there selling. Some of you will have seen me in your stores trying to sell your products. I headed up the sales team for a number of years, but my passion's always been looking at the real nitty gritty of the product and looking at research. And it was interesting listening to what Vicky was saying about, you know, you like to sell products where there's good research behind. And that's one of the first things I look at. And you know, talking about CBD is a really good example. There's such a wealth of information behind that and some really good studies. So yeah, lots of interesting things. I've covered lots of these areas over the years. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully sharing some things that you might not have seen before. That's what it's all about, I hope, that we can find something that maybe is not so familiar with everybody, and maybe make us think a little bit more about what we offer and when we're offering it to those people, because everybody, as we just said, is completely different. Everybody's case is completely different. So asking those questions, getting down to finding out exactly what it's all about really does seem to help. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you.
Cool. So I think obviously we've talked about how many, you know, we're seeing so many people with joint pains. So what can you tell us about the main joint conditions? And I know this is where you've got something that you've prepared earlier.
Here's what I prepared earlier in true Blue Peter fashion. So yeah, I'll just share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Yeah.
Hooray, the technology works. So basically, we're talking about a huge issue. You know, Vicky mentioned there are 20 million sufferers of arthritic joint pain or musculoskeletal joint pain. You know, and I tried to sort of break it down and look at the two most common forms. Yes, there are lots of others, but I've looked at the two most common ones, the ones you're most likely to come across in osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. In the UK, these are the single biggest cause of physical disability. So, and the second most common cause of people taking sick leave after mental health disorders. So really, I mean, we talk a lot about mental health issues. We don't tend to talk in the public eye that much about joint issues. So, you know, considering this is such a big burden on society as far as lost time from work, etc. is concerned, maybe it should be higher on the agenda. Mm-hmm. You know, as far as osteoarthritis is concerned, probably about 8.5 to 10 million people. These are the reported cases. So the actual cases are probably higher than that. These are the people that have been to see their GPs, 8.5 million out of the total population, and half of the people aged 50 and above. So this is traditionally why we tend to see the older generation coming in when it's probably got to a point where they're starting to suffer pain. And what I'd love people to do is look at these things before they get to a point where pain is an issue for them. And then we've got rheumatoid arthritis, you know, less common, certainly, but no less painful, and roughly about 1% of the population suffering with that. So, you know, roughly 70 million people, 60 odd million people. We're looking at 600 to 700,000 people in the UK suffering with rheumatoid arthritis. Just got you a graphic here just to sort of illustrate what's going on in those two different cases. So osteoarthritis, basically, we end up with bone starting rubbing against bone, and then your rheumatoid arthritis is inflamed synovial membrane. So that's the left and the right images there. And you can see the progression of osteoarthritis. And when I go through osteoarthritis in a little while, we'll talk about the stages of osteoarthritis, because it's really helpful to know which nutrients to target at which stages to get the most benefit for these people beyond that. So on the left there, you see a normal joint going all the way through to bones starting rubbing against bone. You can understand why those people in the latter stages of osteoarthritis are in quite severe pain. There's no cushioning at all. So we talk a lot about collagen and cartilage, and collagen is definitely on the increase. I think it's really important if we're looking at collagen and taking it nutritionally that we get a nice one that's been broken into small, manageable pieces, denatured collagen, so the body can absorb it well. But ultimately, cartilage is the key nutrient, the key part of the joints that we're talking about. It's found in our joint linings. That's a image of a joint lining there on the right-hand side. And very much like our homes are built, cartilage is like the bricks of our homes. It needs foundations, it needs a framework, it needs a mortar to hold it all together. Those spaces between cartilage in our joints is occupied by water molecules. And this is probably one reason why hyaluronic acid is a really helpful and important thing, because we know hyaluronic acid is so good at drawing in fluid, holding fluid in the interstitial tissue, the joints, the gaps between our cells. So, and water is really key to a healthy joint, because we don't have a blood supply in our joints, blood supply around it, but actually in the joint itself, there is no blood supply, and the water is the means by which all those nutrients, the vitamin C, for making new cartilage, the sulfur for detoxifying, they need that water to access the joint. So really important that we get that. And good, healthy cartilage gives us that nice springy quality, a quality that we all used to have when we were teenagers and we bounced around and we did all these sports. Before we started having to limp into the health food stores and say, I need something. It's really interesting listening to Vicky talk about rugby players, etc., coming into the store. And I was just saying before on the call that many years ago, I took a 15-year-old rugby team down to South Wales to play rugby, and ended up going into Vicky's store to find some arnica, because one of the boys actually hurt themselves, and arnica was the great thing to help with their joints. So we've got those young sporty people, and I think that's really interesting when we're talking about the pandemic and people just starting to come back in, and a younger demographic. But I also think the pandemic got people thinking more about their physical health. So more people are bike riding, running, exercising, trying to stay fit, to keep their immune system strong. And unfortunately, one of the side effects of that is you do suffer those injuries from time to time. So it's really sort of ties it all together. Really interesting that we talked about menopause earlier on, Joe. You know, I caught this piece just recently saying about how many women are really struggling with their joint health during the menopause, and why is that the case? So we know estrogen really affects cartilage, so that's really important, obviously, for our joint tissue. And we know that during menopause, women can be more likely to get osteoarthritis, particularly in the hands, and possibly rheumatoid arthritis as well. Mm-hmm. So it's not just new aches and pains during the menopause. It's certainly not just all about the hot flushes. You know, there are so many other aspects to menopause, but this is one thing that we do seem to see in women of that demographic, that their pain starts to flare up. It may be old injuries, etc., but that's a time when it really does come to tell. So we'll work our way into osteoarthritis. Are you all right for me to carry on, Joe and Vicky? Shall we carry on?
Really enjoying it, please.
Good.
Sorry, I just muted myself actually because I did. But yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing is, if you can tell us a bit more about it, it's all really interesting stuff.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
also those kind of approaches that we can take in the store, which I know you're going to cover as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
All good.
So we'll start with osteoarthritis, and not many people are actually aware of this, but there is a scale to osteoarthritis. It runs from 1 through to 5. And your GP can actually tell you where you sit on that scale if you want to know. But we'll talk about what's going on at those different stages, and you'll probably be able to work out, if you do suffer from joint pains, where you sit on that scale anyway. We know osteoarthritis tends to be fairly parallel as well. If it's affecting the knees or the hips, you tend to get it on both hips, both knees. Obviously, the spine, you've only got one of those, so it would tend to be just the one area there. And it progresses, unfortunately, with age, and especially if we don't do anything earlier on in our lives as well. And we were talking a little earlier on about glucosamine being really helpful. And I would tend to focus on glucosamine for those people that really haven't got joint problems, who are looking to help their joints for their future lives. So those young people that are coming in, maybe talking a little bit about, I want to do something to help my joints, support them for later in life. Glucosamine would be a really good thing. I would always tend to use a combination product for the various stages, and we'll go through those in a minute. So you've got stage 1 is very much early morning, mild joint stiffness, whereas stage 5 is that severe pain and immobility. And if you think back to the image I showed before of the bones rubbing against the bones, those are stage 5 people. When they get to that stage, it's really quite difficult to offer anything of nutritional value to them. So up to stage 4, we can certainly do something, but after that, I think we're not really going to be able to avoid surgery. So looking at the mild stages, that early morning joint stiffness, waking up, start moving around, and the pain seems to ease off. We've all done that in the morning when we put our feet on the ground and you go, oh, that all maybe not all of us. I'm certainly doing that. And aches and pains are part and parcel of the morning routine and getting up and moving about. But after a little while, it's like the joints are okay. What's going on there is we've started to lose some of those water molecules that are really important for that nourishing, lubricating, hydrating side that they have for the cartilage. Nutrients like vitamin C and sulfur need those fluids, as we said, to access the cartilage. Then required to help build those important building blocks, something called glycosaminoglycans. Don't really need to remember how to say that. GAGs is much easier to remember. I won't tell one because they're all bad. Reduced viscosity of synovial fluid you're seeing at that stage as well. So that lovely sliding motion of our joint over joint, because we've got lovely, nice synovial fluid, starts to become a little bit more difficult because we lose that lovely viscosity, and it's sliding over a little bit too easy, and the cushioning's not there. So really, if we're looking for a perfect partner in the glucosamine world, you're looking at something like glucosamine and chondroitin. And chondroitin is really helpful because chondroitin, like hyaluronic acid, is essentially a water magnet, but it's also a really important nutrient in helping to build these GAGs and produce healthy cartilage, that framework for healthy cartilage to build upon. So chondroitin is going to be really useful to try and thicken that synovial fluid again, try and restore the synovial fluid and help those early stages. And in theory, hopefully we can dial back the clock. If people take it early enough, we can start to hold things and they don't progress to get any worse. We seem to have a little issue. Sorry. There we go.
We can see your slides again. So
yeah. Okay. So as far as stages of osteoarthritis are concerned, we're on to stage 2 to 3 now. We've moved on from the mild form. We're into mild to moderate. And these are the sort of people, as this poor chap here on the left hand of the screen, doing a little bit of gardening, start to feel a little bit of pain coming on. If the spine's affected, you may see a little bit of numbness, a bit of tingling starting to appear as well. And what we've got there is that ongoing loss of water and the viscosity of the synovial fluid. Can you actually see that in presentation mode, or we lost that?
We can just see it. We can just see it in normal mode, but to be honest, it's okay. We can actually, yeah, it's back in presentation mode now.
There we go. Sorry. Right. Yeah, so key events, we've got that loss of water, viscosity of the synovial fluid. We're starting to see lack of integrity of the joints. The joints are starting to fall apart a little bit. And my next image will show you what's going on as far as that falling apart is concerned. And a lot of it's down to low sulfur content of the joints. And we know for a fact that arthritic joints are low in sulfur, and that slows down cell detoxification. But it's also really important is sulfur for tying the collagen strips together. And I've got an interesting image to show you on the next slide of that. So for that middle stage, those 2 to 3, you know, those gardeners amongst us, minor athletes that, you know, feel pain coming on when they start doing a little bit of exercise, something like glucosamine, MSM, and chondroitin would be beneficial. And MSM comes into this. MSM is really important as a source of sulfur. It comes from ocean plankton naturally. We release between 30 and 50 million tons a year of sulfur into the atmosphere from ocean plankton. And then that comes down after reacting with ozone and UV light as MSM, which is then taken up by plants, etc. So I don't know which plants are the richest source of MSM, but yeah, that's how it happens. Both MSM and chondroitin have really beneficial effects on those joint structures. So chondroitin for the springiness and MSM for multi-directional resistance to loads, and also it's an natural anti-inflammatory because of its detoxifying effects. And we also have that really important structural role that it plays. And here's an illustration of the structural role it plays. You look at a set of ladders with the rungs all broken. That essentially is what's going on in the joints when the sulfur starts to disappear. The rungs of the ladder that hold the collagen strips together start to disintegrate because we're not getting the nutrition in. So moving further forward onto stage 3 and 4, the moderate forms, they're in fairly severe discomfort by this stage. They've got a restriction in their joint mobility, pain constant. We can also be looking at this stage with people that are coming in at depression as well. They may well be suffering quite severe depression because they're under that constant cycle of pain every day. And so sulfur is really helpful for that. So what we would look at for that is glucosamine, MSM, and chondroitin, the same as stage 2 to 3, but then you would want to add something really good as a natural anti-inflammatory on top of that. So maybe turmeric or CBD, or certainly using arnica gel can be really helpful for these people as well. And basically we're trying to detoxify, so that's where the MSM's coming in, try and tie those structures back together. But at the same time, you want to try and give those people some immediate relief whilst we're doing these. These are longer term things. They're not going to change overnight. And quite often we'll lose people from taking, say, glucosamine, MSM, and chondroitin supplements because they don't see immediate results and they don't give it long enough. Usually they realize that it was helping them when they stop taking it, and then they find, actually, yeah, I was better off than I am now. So yeah, and turmeric obviously is such a really helpful nutrient for that side of things. Stage 5, unfortunately, getting even more inflammation, bone starting to grind against bone, patients in constant pain. And really, unfortunately for those people, it probably is the surgeon's knife at that stage, hip replacements, knee replacements, that type of thing. We can try and help them, keep them comfortable until that day comes, because waiting lists are so long. But ultimately, we're not going to be able to help them too much. So just running very quickly through the nutrients themselves. Glucosamine is what we call an amino monosaccharide. It's part amino acid and part sugar. Most of it comes from shellfish sources, although there are some really good vegan sources. Aspergillus niger is the little critter that helps to convert this into vegetarian and vegan forms, and it's great for anybody that's allergic to shellfish. There's some new glucosamine on the market, glucosamine, which is a really nice vegan form. And unfortunately, glucosamine is something that synthesis, as with many things in our bodies, starts to decline as we get older as well. So really important as one of those building blocks. Chondroitin, again, really important building block. Animal cartilage is the only really significant source of chondroitin sulfate, although there is now a vegan one. It's early days for that, but it is available, it is out there. And as I say, it's really important for attracting moisture, increasing the springiness, and forming gags. MSM, as I say, this is the substance that comes down in rainfall, that's produced by ocean plankton, and it has three really key roles. It increases permeability of cell membranes, so that improves cell nutrition. It's great detoxifying, and it reverses that loss of the rungs of the ladder, if you like. Another one that we see quite useful is rosehip. Not one that we maybe always think about, but rosehip's beneficial from a point of view. It has these glycosides of mono and diglycerol in there, and these have an anti-inflammatory effect. So it might be useful to add some rosehip into the mix. I mean, we as a company have a glucosamine, MSM, chondroitin, turmeric, and rosehip product. Those type of things are really helpful. It exerts that anti-inflammatory effect by reducing white blood cell production, and that's in turn going to help with the inflammatory response at the site of the irritation. So really helpful there. Moving on to rheumatoid arthritis, some quite distressing looking images. You can imagine how painful that must be to have your joints so displaced. It mainly affects the joints. The small joints in the hands and feet are usually the first ones affected, and it is also symmetrical. So both hands, both feet. The pain is usually a throbbing, aching type of pain, often feels stiff as well, especially in the morning after a period of inactivity. And they can become quite warm to the touch, those joints as well. It's an autoimmune condition, so this is unfortunately the body starting to attack itself, and antibodies are sent to the lining of the joint, causing it to attack the surrounding tissue. So that leads to basically what we have is within the joints, that's something called the synovium that covers our joints. That becomes inflamed, and chemicals are being released that consequently then will damage tendons and bones and ligaments, etc. So if we don't do anything, if that's allowed to go on unchecked, then unfortunately it can completely destroy the joint. So the orthodox medical approach is very much to go down the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug route, which is really interesting. I mean, a few years back, we had the withdrawal of a couple of drugs, one called Vioxx, one called Celebrex, because basically they were harming people. There's a study, 1,800 people with osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, who taken these non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs and then assessed. And over a quarter of them, when they had the ones that had to stop, over a quarter of those actually had gastroduodenal ulcers as a consequence of taking those. So we know that what we do is hopefully going to be beneficial for people without having any of those unwanted side effects. And some really interesting things for rheumatoid arthritis. Interesting. We talked about essential fatty acids earlier on. I was listening. They're really important, and the balance of our essential fatty acids is absolutely vital to make sure that we don't get that inflammation. So both omega-3 and omega-6 can really help, but what we don't tend to get enough of in our diets is enough omega-3, and so that becomes even more important. Devil's Claw is a really useful one because it helps to balance the autoimmune system as well. Great anti-inflammatory. We've got some licensed products on the market as well, so that's a nice one because we can actually share that with the public what they're for. It's always nice to have a health claim that we can use on a product. Turmeric, as I say, absolutely fabulous. One thing that I always do say as well to be aware of is many of these people coming in will be on other medication, and piperine, which is often found in combination with turmeric to help up the absorption of turmeric, does interact with a lot of medication. So always want to sort of bear in mind when we're doing it. And to finish off, I've just literally put the omega-3 and omega-6 pathways up here just to explain, how we go about increasing our omega-3 levels. And traditionally, fish oils are important. And why are fish oils important? Because EPA and DHA are what ultimately make this series 3 prostaglandins, which are anti-inflammatory, and that's what we're looking for from this. Now, we can do it from vegan sources. Flaxseed oil is a great vegan source of omega-3 fatty acids. However, unfortunately, flaxseed oil has to go through quite a complicated process to get to that point. So it has to go through a couple of enzyme systems that require nutrients to be present. So if you're a vegan and you want to go down the route of upping your omega-3, make sure you get your nutrients on board, get a good multivitamin on board, because you're going to need those nutrients to make that conversion. Obviously, there's also algal DHA, is a really useful source that's increasing in popularity and great for the sustainability message. So moving on to omega-6, as I said before, the balance is absolutely key. So we want more omega-3 in our diet. You know, traditionally we were probably about 5-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3 in our diets. We've now ended up probably about 120-to-1 because we have a lot of omega-6 in our diet from things like vegetable oils, margarines, etc. And you might think, well, that's not really a problem, is it? It absolutely is, because the more omega-6 we have in it that's not balanced with omega-3, the more we follow this second pathway where you see arachidonic acid, pro-inflammatory and platelet aggregation. Arachidonic acid is in meat and dairy products. And so we would tend to say, you know, this is a really good thing for somebody with chronic inflammation, those dietary pieces of advice to avoid red meat, avoid dairy, because that's going to help to push things a little bit back in the opposite direction. You know, there is an anti-inflammatory side to omega-6, but we need ultimately to have the balance right with the omega-3 and get more omega-3 on board. So some nice balanced oils out there with 3, 6, 9, etc. But that ultimately is where we would need something like a fish oil or a flaxseed oil, and making sure that we're converting it properly before we start looking at adding in more omega-6 into the diet. So that is me. Hopefully we've got some questions.
Well, I've got a question for you, Tim. I found that really fascinating, that they've learned today, so that was great. One of the things I was thinking about when you were going through was vitamin D. One of the things Boris did, and he did a lot wrong, but one of the things he did was he commissioned a research into vitamin D. And my understanding was the results of this research was about 4,000 IUs of vitamin D is a good kind of daily dosage. It's still something that a lot of people are a bit frightened about, kind of recommending high dosage. But again, my understanding is at that kind of level, even if they was to sunbathe all day, they would still be within the parameters. What's your feeling? Because again, there's this whole not utilizing calcium properly, causing dumping into the joint tissue.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting one. And 4,000 IU, yes, it does sound awfully high, doesn't it? But that's sunbathing thing your body won't make anymore if it's got enough. So, you know, basically, we'll only make what we need. It was really interesting. There was a study done a number of years ago in California, and obviously they get sunshine all day long, every day of the year, and near enough. And their official recognition was 2,200 IUs of vitamin D a day. So for a country where we very rarely see the sun, I know we've had a good summer this year, but and certainly in the winter months, 4,000 IUs absolutely fine to take as a daily dose, and it is so important. I would probably add into that vitamin K2 as being really, really vital. You know, you talk about calcium dumping syndrome, and so bad for the arteries, so bad for our joints, etc. That can be really managed nicely by making sure there's sufficient K2 in the diet, because K2 basically takes it from where it shouldn't be, i.e. the arteries and the joints, and puts it into the bones where it should be. So I advocate, you know, using vitamin D3 and K2 together as a really good, strong combination. And there was quite a lot of interest during the pandemic on K2 as well, so for a role that it plays.
Yeah, I think there's a research paper out this week on K2 for that very thing with arteries. I know it's a supplement I take myself, so certainly it's well up there. Should be on your hit list.
Absolutely, you know, for me, K2 should be as popular as D3. You know, I've been watching this one for probably 7 or 8 years now, and hoping for it to finally achieve that critical mass. I think it's such an important nutrient. So yeah.
Joe, have we got any other questions coming
Yeah,
through?
so I was just going to ask if anybody else out there, you're more than happy to either unmute your microphone and just fire a question, or if you want to put something in chat, if you prefer, we can pick up any questions from there. So
And I'll just add as well, if anyone has a question and doesn't feel confident about sending us, or we run out of time, feel free to email us and we'll endeavour to answer any question you have.
And I'm sure Tim, from your point of view, you're more than happy to catch up with stores.
Absolutely, yeah, and happy to share the
training,
presentation. You know, please utilize it for members of the team, etc. If there's something you found useful in there, please do use it.
So any questions from anybody who's joined us? And a few people have joined kind of before the start. So welcome to anyone who joined. Sorry, after the start. Welcome to anyone who joined kind of along the way. I've been trying to let people in as I've kind of seen you pop up. So yeah, any questions from anybody who's joined in the session? Anybody brave enough to ask anything?
Jim.
While we're waiting, can I ask another question?
I was going to say, Jim's got a question as well, Vicky. So
let Jim ask.
And then you ask your other question.
Okay, I might go. I suppose I'm asking a question in my as a non-retailer, non-specialist, but I suppose that one of the things that interested me was what the expectation is from your customers in terms of how long using a sort of nutrient approach, people, you know, what their expectations are, what you can tell them, and I know that we're talking about a number of approaches, a number of nutrients, but do people sort of expect things to happen more quickly than you're able to tell them they are?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly in my experience, you know, often people will say, well, how long will it take? When will I see a difference? And the answer has to be that, you know, it's impossible to tell in anybody how long something's going to take for them. We can refer to backup studies of dosages, etc., but we can't tell you it's going to take this long. What I think maybe is interesting over what's happened over the last few years, why perhaps people are going more towards turmeric and CBD is they've got more of an immediate pain relieving benefits. People are seeing that, and potentially they're seeing that, you know, within the first month of taking it, they're seeing some difference. So they've got a motivation to keep taking it. The sort of harder things are perhaps things like your glucosamine, your chondroitin, that are working at that kind of deeper level. I found it particularly interesting looking at those different stages, and I probably hadn't thought by now that actually glucosamine, chondroitin, MSM are in the earlier stages. But that's where it's going to be a lot more difficult for people to kind of see, oh yes, it's helping me, because they can't see their joint every day. And I guess those are the ones where it is a lot more difficult, and what we have to encourage our customers, give them information like we've learned today, to say actually these are a little bit more about protecting your joint, trying to prevent, if we're allowed to say that, but try to kind of who knows what we're allowed to say, but yeah, to try and take these things now, but then bring in things like the turmeric when they're looking to see a bit more of the pain relieving properties. But yeah, we can never answer the question exactly how long it's going to take, and I think it is a bit of a shame in the supplement world that often people will do something for a month and go, oh, it's not working for me. And hopefully that's our job, to try and show them as much evidence as we can, to say, okay, potentially this is what it's doing for you, and studies are longer term. They're not 1 month. 1 month isn't going to be what makes the difference.
It was quite interesting when NICE stopped giving glucosamine on prescription. This is going back a few years ago now, and I had a lot of customers kind of suddenly stopping their glucosamine. And then a whole flood of customers coming like a month or two later saying, oh, have you like glucosamine? And Tim touched on this as well. Sometimes it's not until they stop it, they realise how much it was doing for them, particularly in some
absolutely. We see that.
in our everyday. It's kind of working quietly behind in the background. I was just quickly asked Tim, because I've got a lot of clients coming in with rheumatoid, much more than what I would say the 1%. It's quite interesting because you're seeing this like increase in people with thyroid problems as well, to whether that, you know, whether it is a thing that we should ask our customers if they've had their thyroid checked, particularly with arthritis, and get them to pop back to their doctor. Because again, thinking about underlying health problems and, like I said, looking at their diet and their gluten and their sugar intake and whether they're living on Diet Coke. Because again, asking these questions about their diet is vital, because if they've got a really nutrient poor diet, they won't get that essential fatty acid conversion going on. As Tim said, getting them on a multi, looking at antioxidant nutrients with zinc and B vitamins in there, so you're getting that conversion is really important.
Yeah, and things like your selenium, your zinc for thyroid function are so key as well, aren't they? There are so many nutrients that are crucial for all the different body systems, and we've got to look at it from a whole body point of view. You don't just look at those isolated joints. The diet's really important. The whole taking the whole, unfortunately, it means spending time with customers, doesn't it? And spending a lot of time sometimes. Hopefully that knowledge that you're able to offer over does give them some comfort in the long run. And if they buy into it and they give that time to you, hopefully they'll then put the time that's required into trying the supplements. And we've seen it over the years so many times, people who stop taking the supplements because they think it's not doing anything. And this is why I think it's really important to maybe have that overlayering of something that, like the CBD and the turmeric, that really does help in the short term, whilst the workhorses of the glucosamine world are doing their bit left behind the scenes.
Yeah. No, it's been really good. Are there any more questions coming through? Or I think we're kind of working on our time schedule now, aren't we?
I think we are, yeah. We've covered an hour, and I guess people are getting hungry, etc. So I think obviously to say thank you to Tim, to say thank you to everyone who's joined us, and basically to reiterate what you said, Vicky, any follow-up that anybody wants, we've got a handout that we can send. I've got the emails of people who've joined us this evening. We've got a handout to send, and welcome to get in touch with us, or if you're happy, we'll share your details, Tim, so for any stores that want to get in touch with you.
No problem at all. We
can do it that way. And and just to mention, the next session, we're on a roll here. So we're going to try and do these every 2 months. So the next session is in November, and we're going to be focusing on immune health. And we'll have a guest from the technical team from Viridian with us in November.
Sorry?
So looking forward to that one as well.
I was just the last minute.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah,
we'll definitely send the handouts. So thank you so much, everybody, and we will see you in November, if not at the Manchester Trade Show on the 1st of October.
Lovely.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Say something to you, Joanne.
Oh, yes.
I'm in Ireland, and I know we would have had quite a few more members of Health Stores Ireland attend if it was later. 6 o'clock is really, really tight for all of us over here.
Okay.
Yeah, we completely appreciate that. And one of the things is kind of timing, and we're looking to that. But this is all videoed, so anyone who's missed anything will be able to go on the NAHS site and see it, and show it to all your staff members. It really is what we hope is a really good training exercise for everybody.
Thank you very much.
I mean, and certainly send us over any feedback, because we can look at the way we do things, and see whether we do different times for different ones or whatever. But we'll certainly look at all the feedback, etc.
Thanks very much.
Fabulous. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.